The Young and the Restless spoilers. The storm that had been gathering over Genoa City finally broke in silence, not with thunder or lightning, but with the quiet, devastating truth that had been waiting for decades to be unearthed. Sharon Newman had lived her entire life balancing on the edge of secrets, some born of love, others of shame, and now the ghosts she had spent years burying were clawing their way back to the surface. Mitch Bacall had returned under the guise of a reformed man, but the longer he lingered in her orbit, the more she saw through the mask. Beneath the carefully crafted charm and the polite indifference was the same haunting presence that once called himself Matt Clark, the same man who had stolen her youth, poisoned her peace, and shattered the innocence of everything she once believed in. His eyes were colder now, the voice more measured, but the arrogance was the same, and Sharon could feel it pressing down on her like a memory she had never fully escaped. For weeks, she had convinced herself that confronting him would bring closure, that standing face to face with the man who embodied her greatest regret would free her at last. But the moment she cornered him, alone, in that dimly lit room filled with the stale scent of betrayal, she realized that the truth she sought was not liberation but annihilation. Their confrontation had been inevitable, written in the DNA of their shared history long before either of them could change it. Mitch had been circling her for days, teasing her with hints that he knew things she'd spent her life hiding. He played with her fear like it was a game, dangling words like truth, family, and fatherhood as if he held the keys to her destruction. Sharon tried to ignore him, tried to cling to the illusion that Mitch Bacall was not Matt Clark, that this was just another cruel coincidence of fate. But deep down, she knew better. Every gesture, every smirk, every calculated silence pulled her further into the realization that the past had come back not to haunt her, but to destroy her. When she finally confronted him, she didn't come as a victim, she came as a woman who had survived too much to let one man dictate her life again. She demanded answers, demanded that he stop playing with her family, demanded that he admit who he really was. And for a brief moment, the mask cracked. Matt Clark's voice, the real one, dark and venomous, slipped through. He denied everything at first, of course. That was his way to deflect, confuse, charm, then strike. He laughed at her accusations, reminded her of all the times she'd been wrong before, and painted himself as the misunderstood man just trying to start over. He called her paranoid, accused her of dragging the past into the present because she couldn't let go. But Sharon knew lies when she heard them, she had built her life surviving them. The more he denied, the more she pushed. She brought up Noah, his sudden interest in her son, the strange way he'd been following him, the half-finished sentences and looks that lingered too long. Mitch smirked, that cruel half-smile that once made her blood run cold. And then, with a calmness that could only belong to someone who believed he had already won, he told her that Noah was not Nick's son. The words hit her like a blade to the chest. For years, she had buried that truth so deep it almost felt like a myth, a single night, a single mistake, a single moment of manipulation that changed everything. She had convinced herself it didn't matter, that biology didn't define family, that love could rewrite blood. But now, hearing it from Matt's lips, she knew the truth had been waiting to destroy her all along. The revelation tore through her with equal parts rage and despair. Sharon's world, already fragile from loss and memory, splintered in an instant. Everything she had built with Nick, every act of forgiveness, every attempt at healing, suddenly felt like a lie wrapped in good intentions. And yet, even then, she wasn't angry at Nick. She was angry at Matt for daring to speak it, for taking something sacred and turning it into ammunition. She begged him to keep silent, to leave Noah out of his twisted vendetta, to let her protect what little peace her family still had. But Matt was never the kind of man who thrived on mercy. The idea of holding Sharon's fate in his hands thrilled him. He taunted her, reminding her that he could go public, that one word from him could turn the Newmans' world upside down. He even claimed that exposing the truth was an act of justice, that the world deserved to know the real story. But for Sharon, it wasn't justice, it was ruin. The argument escalated beyond words, turning into something primal, something fueled by years of suppressed fear. Sharon's voice broke as she pleaded with him to stop, to think of Noah, to consider what this revelation would do to everyone. But Matt saw only power, the same kind he'd always chased. He accused her of being a coward, of hiding behind her perfect image, of denying her past to keep her precious family intact. When she tried to walk away, he grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her skin, and whispered that it was too late. He was going to tell everyone. He had proof, DNA results, hidden recordings, everything he needed to expose her. In that instant, Sharon realized there was no reasoning with him. He was not here for redemption, he was here for revenge. Her fear turned into clarity. She saw before her not just a man, but a pattern, the same cruelty that had once destroyed her life now threatening to destroy her son's. The weight of every sleepless night, every buried guilt, every sacrifice for the sake of her family, came crashing down. Matt took a step closer, and the room felt smaller. His voice dropped into that low, dangerous tone she remembered from years ago, the one that told her he enjoyed watching her break. He spoke of Noah as if he owned him, as if the boy's blood made him more of a father than the man who had raised him. He spoke of Nick as if his ignorance were a joke. He even spoke of Sharon herself, calling her weak, pathetic, unworthy of the love she pretended to deserve. That was when she snapped. The moment was not planned. There was no calculation, no decision, just a desperate impulse born out of fear and fury. The gun had been in her purse for weeks, a precaution she never thought she'd use. When she pulled it out, her hands trembled, not from hatred, but from heartbreak. She warned him, begged him to stop, but he kept coming closer, still smirking, still sure that she wouldn't do it. He dared her, like he always did, to prove she had power. And in that split second, Sharon Newman did something she never thought she could. The gun went off. The sound shattered the silence, echoing through the walls like the final punctuation on a chapter that had taken too long to end. When it was over, Mitch Bacall, or Matt Clark, lay motionless, his arrogance finally silenced. The room smelled of gunpowder and regret. Sharon stood frozen, the gun still in her hand, her breath caught between horror and disbelief. The reality of what she'd done began to sink in, not as victory, but as devastation. She hadn't killed him out of vengeance. She had killed him because there was no other way to protect the people she loved. Yet even in death, Matt's presence lingered, his blood seeping into the floorboards like the stain of every secret he'd ever uncovered. The man who had tormented her for decades was gone, but the truth he carried would not die with him. Because somewhere, someone else would find out. Someone would ask questions. Someone would connect the dots. And that is how the next act begins. The news of Mitch's death will ripple through Genoa City like an aftershock. Noah will sense the tension before he knows the cause, drawn into a nightmare he never saw coming. Nick will be torn between anger and confusion, his trust in Sharon collapsing as the investigation deepens. Sienna will break under the weight of suspicion, knowing her connection to Mitch makes her an easy target. Detective Burrow will arrive at the scene, expression unreadable, already calculating which version of the truth will serve him best. And through it all, Sharon will stand at the center, calm on the outside, dying on the inside, carrying a secret that could destroy everything she fought to protect. The DNA truth. The bullet. The blood. The past. It's all the same, and it's all hers now. In the end, Sharon Newman's story becomes the perfect tragedy, a woman who spent her life trying to heal others, forced to become her own executioner. The irony is cruel but fitting. She killed Matt Clark not to erase the past, but to keep it from repeating. Yet, as the credits roll and the camera lingers on her haunted eyes, one question will echo across Genoa City: did she pull the trigger to protect her family, or to silence her guilt once and for all? Because in the young and the restless, truth and love have always been deadly allies, and every secret, no matter how deeply buried, has its price. The shockwaves from Mitch Bacall's, or rather Matt Clark's, death did not stay confined to Genoa City. Within hours, whispers had spread far beyond, reaching Los Angeles, where the entertainment press devoured the story like vultures circling over fresh tragedy. To outsiders, Matt had always seemed like a secondary figure, a mysterious presence whose purpose was to stir conflict and then vanish. Many casual viewers assumed his exit would be little more than a line in tomorrow's recap, a narrative convenience to make room for new faces. But those who had followed the long, painful threads of the young and the restless understood that his death was no mere accident of storytelling. The writers had been building toward this fall for months, perhaps even years, and Matt's final breath was the key that unlocked the storm waiting to consume everyone left behind. For Sharon Newman, it was both an ending and a beginning, the end of decades of torment and the beginning of a slow descent into the kind of guilt that corrodes the soul from within. She had pulled the trigger not as a killer, but as a mother protecting her son from a truth too cruel to face. Yet as the headlines screamed about a shocking murder twist and social media turned the tragedy into spectacle, Sharon's world was falling apart in private. Each morning, the reflection in her mirror seemed to shift, showing less of the composed woman she tried to be and more of the fractured survivor she'd spent years burying. The gunshot had silenced Matt, but it had also awakened the truth he threatened to expose, that Noah, the boy she raised with love and pride, was not Nick's son. Nick had always trusted Sharon's instinct, her heart, even when their marriage broke under the weight of too many betrayals. But when he heard whispers that Sharon had been seen near the scene of Mitch's death, a shadow passed through him, a flicker of dread he couldn't quite explain. The police investigation, now public, quickly uncovered details that painted a damning picture: the confrontation, the gun registered in Sharon's name, the traces of her perfume in the air of that cursed room. And then came the rumor that broke him completely, the suggestion that Noah might not be his biological child. At first, Nick refused to believe it. His mind rejected the very idea. His love for Noah was too pure, too deeply rooted to be altered by DNA. But denial could only hold back the tide for so long. When the results surfaced, quietly leaked by a source who might have been on Mitch's payroll before his death, the truth became undeniable. Noah Newman was not Nick's son. The betrayal sliced deeper than any physical wound because it rewrote every memory he'd ever cherished. Every baseball game, every father-son talk, every proud glance was now colored by a truth he had never asked to know. The revelation didn't erase his love, but it poisoned it, turning every thought into a question of what else had been hidden. Sharon had not just killed a man, she had killed the illusion of their family's foundation. Nick's world became a blur of disbelief and rage, not because of the blood on Sharon's hands, but because of the lie she had lived for over 20 years. In the middle of this chaos stood Noah, a man caught between two fathers, two truths, and one unbearable choice. To him, Matt Clark had been a stranger, a name whispered in warning. To learn that this man, this manipulative villain, had been his biological father was more than a shock. It was an identity crisis that struck at the core of his being. He had always defined himself through strength and stability, the quiet artist of the Newman clan who sought peace where others waged war. Now that peace was shattered. The blood that ran through his veins was not Nick's, but Matt's, the same blood that had caused so much suffering. The thought sickened him, as if his entire existence had been rewritten in a single night. Noah's response to the truth became one of the most heart-wrenching arcs the young and the restless had ever delivered. His face, once full of warmth and quiet confidence, began to reflect the torment of a man torn apart from within. He avoided Nick, not out of shame, but because he couldn't bear to see the disappointment in his eyes. He avoided Sharon because forgiveness seemed impossible, even though he knew she had done everything, even murder, to protect him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flash of the gun, heard the echo of the shot that ended one life and destroyed several others. And though no one said it aloud, he knew the guilt would never fade. Sharon had taken a life to preserve his, and in doing so had cursed them both with silence. In the weeks that followed, Genoa City became a stage for grief, speculation, and moral reckoning. Reporters crowded outside Crimson Lights. The Newman family withdrew into its fortress of wealth and secrecy, while the rest of the town whispered theories in every cafe and boardroom. Some said Sharon acted in self-defense. Others believed she had snapped under pressure. But the truth, the real truth, was something darker, something that would never be spoken publicly. Sharon's decision had been neither madness nor calculation, it was an act of primal love, the kind that defies reason. She had killed to protect her child from a truth too monstrous to bear, knowing that the moment she pulled the trigger, she was sealing her own fate. As for Nick, his love for Sharon battled endlessly with his sense of betrayal. He wanted to hate her, to see her as the murderer the world now called her, but each time he looked at her, he saw the woman who had once saved him from himself. The same woman who had held their family together through loss after loss. The conflict tore at him until he could barely breathe. His nights were restless, his days mechanical, and his heart a battlefield between vengeance and understanding. He told himself that Noah was still his son, that biology didn't define love, but deep down, he couldn't shake the image of Matt Clark, the man who had stolen so much from him, now claiming victory even in death. The most haunting part of it all was the way Noah carried himself. He refused to crumble, refused to become a victim of his father's sins. Instead, he worked tirelessly, channeling his pain into his art, his projects, his silence. Yet those close to him saw the cracks. The nights he disappeared without word. The haunted expression when he looked at family photographs. The way he flinched whenever someone mentioned the word blood. Noah was strong, yes, but strength has a breaking point, and his was nearing fast. He felt tainted, as if his existence had been rewritten by a cruel hand. To be the son of Matt Clark was to inherit a curse, and to be protected by a killer mother was to live in eternal contradiction. Meanwhile, the rest of the town continued to speculate. Some believed that Matt's death was only the beginning, that Sharon's crime would set off a chain of vengeance and blackmail that would drag the Newmans into yet another war. Victor, ever the strategist, began maneuvering quietly behind the scenes, determined to protect his family's name at all costs. Others whispered that Sharon might not face charges at all, that evidence would mysteriously disappear, witnesses would change their stories, and Detective Burroughs' investigation would hit a dead end. But justice in Genoa City has never been about the law, it has always been about survival. And Sharon, who had survived everything from heartbreak to madness, would now have to survive her own conscience. The irony of Matt's death was not lost on anyone. For years, he had been the embodiment of chaos, the man who thrived on destruction, who weaponized truth like a knife. In the end, it was that same truth that killed him. The revelation he tried to unleash, the secret he believed would ruin Sharon, became his undoing. Yet even from the grave, Matt continued to haunt them all. His death had not ended the story, it had begun a new one, one built on guilt, lies, and the unbearable silence of those left behind. Sharon's eyes, once bright with maternal warmth, now reflected the cold emptiness of a woman who knew that every choice she made would eventually destroy someone she loved. And so, as the news faded from the headlines and the public's attention turned elsewhere, Genoa City remained frozen in quiet devastation. Sharon lived each day with the unbearable knowledge of what she had done. Nick drifted further away, unable to reconcile the woman he loved with the killer she had become. And Noah, caught between them, stood as the living proof of every secret, every sin, every act of misguided love that had brought them to this point. The world might have moved on, but for the Newmans, time had stopped. Because in the young and the restless, no truth stays buried forever, and no heart, no matter how strong, survives unscarred when love turns into survival.